Hello there, everybody, and welcome back to Star Wars Lads. This is this month's tier list for July. We are talking lightsaber duels as chosen by all of you in our latest poll for the month's tier list. So we are going to be doing polls every month, the week before the tier list comes out, for your vote for what will be the next tier list. So stay tuned for next month in August for the next poll. But we are going to get into the tier list right now. But before we do so, please hit that like button down below, subscribe to the channel, and comment below. Let us know your favorite lightsaber duel and how you'd rank maybe in your top 5 or so. So let's bring in the tier list here. Also, if you guys could reach to like 15 likes or so, that would be awesome on this video. Doing the tier list, it is all duels from the films, so all 12 films, including the Clone Wars film, and then select duels from the shows, including the 2003 Clone Wars. I didn't put all of them in because that would be like a 2-hour tier list if we had every Clone Wars duel. So let's get started with Qui-Gon versus Darth Maul. This one is very, very short, and I guess is important because it reveals the Sith to the galaxy again, but I'd say probably C or D for me.
I'd say C tier because it introduces like the speed of prequel fighting. That's like our first real glimpse of it.
Duel of the Fates. So this is, I think, going to be a pretty easy one as well. 5 in the S tier. I think I would drop Duel of the Fates in the S tier. It is, like you said, the origins of the prequel style Jedi, fast moving choreographed lightsaber dueling. Duel of Fates is one of the best, and it has an incredible soundtrack, one of the best songs in all of Star Wars. For me, it's an S.
Yeah, I have to say it is an S for sure. There's like small details that I really love about it. Just the way it starts, it's pretty iconic of a pose with the music. Dun, 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 it just like perfectly lands, right? I also like that there's like more fisticuffs. Like I love when uh, Maul gets Obi-Wan off the bridge. Immediately Qui-Gon retaliates with like the punch and then like the backhand and to flatten out Maul and then take advantage, right? Like there's a little bit of physicality here.
Yeah, usually people like to compare prequel duels versus original trilogy duels and say that one is more flash and one is more substance. Duel of Fates is one that is heavily flash, but it's more of a symbolic substance rather than like Battle of Heroes, where it is verbal or you see the true consequences. Here is a symbolic thing that sets up the next 15 years of Anakin's life, and ultimately it doesn't go so well after this. So next we have, I split these up into 2: Obi-Wan versus Dooku, and then we also have Anakin versus Dooku, mainly because neither one of them fight him at the same time, so they basically are 2 separate duels. Obi-Wan doesn't really do very well against Dooku. I love how Dooku taunts him the whole time, but again, Obi-Wan kind of at the worst point in his career when he fights Dooku. I'd say for me, this one is a C or a D.
See, I'm almost tempted to say F tier because it's probably the most disappointing show of Obi-Wan. It's supposed to highlight Dooku, as being a master duelist, going for like the little cut on the shoulder and the leg, just like even like the wounds that he gives Obi-Wan are stylish and taunting. It's still very disappointing that Obi-Wan came in with all that bluster and then just gets knocked out very quick. I'd argue for a very low D tier.
I just think it is on another level from Anakin Dooku. Mainly, even though Anakin does a little better against Dooku than Obi-Wan, this duel is just about 3 seconds of actual lightsaber choreography, and then the rest, Anakin cuts the power, and you can't see anything. Some nice close-ups of the light on their face, but other than that, there's really nothing that exciting in this duel. So for me, this is an F.
I will argue D tier. I think it's not a great duel. Obviously, it's definitely there to showcase just how much arrogance and you know like flaw and folly that both Obi-Wan has, but Anakin does too, right? Anakin's is more of a showmanship fighter at this point. I will say that he does bring a level of closeness to Dooku. Like Dooku's like breathing a little bit heavier after the fight. There's a little bit more weight behind Anakin's fighting even at this point.
That's fine. I'll put it in D tier. Next, we have Yoda versus Dooku, which a lot of people loved when it came out and has since kind of received less love and praise. I think as we've seen Yoda do more fighting, it's become less exciting. For me, my favorite part of this by far is before the duel when they're using their force powers and they're kind of taunting each other. The duel itself is fine. For me, I would say probably B-ish for me.
He does put a good fight. I mean, he doesn't lose the duel to Dooku. Dooku kind of plays a cheap trick. So I think I'll give it a B solely because, Dooku couldn't outclass Yoda at all. I just think that if we had seen a little bit more of, them kind of both, maybe we see Dooku still try to duel Yoda, but Yoda starts throwing in a little bit more of the Force, which he was already winning at the start, and then that forces Dooku to just be like, all right, disconnect here with the dueling.
So next we have the first of the three duels from Star Wars Clone Wars that I put in here from 2003. And it is Ventress versus Anakin Skywalker on Yavin 4. This is a super iconic fight. I've always loved this one. I don't know if it's quite S for me or not yet, but I definitely would say A.
A tier, no arguments there. There's just like the whole concept of Ventress as a huntress is really fun here. Like the way she like force speeds, knocks out all these clones. Visually, it's really fun, but I think everything on the Messiah Temple, it's perfect because it shows like the power difference. It shows the coloring the lighting was so cool.
It's absolutely spectacular. I watch this one all the time. And same with Grievous versus the rest of the Jedi, featuring Ki-Adi-Mundi and Shaak Ti, Aayla, as well as Shaggy. I love this scene. It's one of my favorite scenes, and I think I'm leaning towards A, but it's also not much of a duel. Grievous just whoops them. But Ki-Adi-Mundi does hold his ground. This is probably my favorite Grievous thing ever, so I'm leaning towards A.
Yeah, I think that is the biggest issue. Like he has a great entrance where he just stomps and destroys Shaggy, and it's more of them like trying to like be like, "Whoa, this spinning arms! Like, what are we supposed to do?" It showcases Grievous as a great warrior. As a duelist, it's just like I don't know if he really duels them. It's just more like the intimidation and then the tech that really throws off the Jedi who just have no clue what to do. I want to argue top of B. I'll give you an A, but it's not a very strong A for me.
I'll put it at bottom of A right now, and then we see what the rest of the duels I have on here are. General Grievous versus Shakti and the other two Jedi in on Coruscant. I've always enjoyed this, but this is kind of more of a prolonged scene as well. I think it's a really, really solid scene all around. I'd probably put it B if the other two are A.
Yeah, it almost touches the original Grievous entrance for me. Again, some duels come down to like where it's happening and the way that they transverse the whole landscape of Coruscant from Chancellor's office to the stations to the underground safety bunker. Like, I love especially the train yard scene. In terms of a fight, though, it's not really much. Like once he finally gets to Shock T. So yeah, I'd give it a B tier too.
Sounds good to me. All right. Next is Ventress versus Obi-Wan from the Clone Wars movie. This is a pretty solid fight, but it's also a pretty standard fight. I don't think it's bad by any means, though. And it was also cool to see Ventress connect her two lightsabers together for like a double bladed, but also split into two sabers as well. Definitely on the lesser end of the spectrum, C or D.
Yeah, I will give it a D myself, an upper D, but not anything too special. It's nice that like some duels are all about the language, and her and Kenobi just have this strong, like flirtatious, like nature with their like dueling talk.
Next is the second duel from that movie, Anakin versus Dooku. Now this one's a bit more creative. On Tatooine, so they use some sand. There's one part where I remember Anakin like pushing sand into Dooku, and he like uses his lightsaber to kind of like create like a spin vortex, which just doesn't really make any sense. There's some interesting ideas here. I think it's definitely better than Ventress Obi-Wan. So if that one's in D, I'd put this one in C.
It's not even that great, honestly. It's just they try to also mimic a lot of like live action fights, with like with some of the stances and all that. Yeah, I'll give you a C. I'm not too fond of it though myself.
Let's just
Yeah,
do
I can
that
put it
because I
there.
think the rest of the duels, because I cherry picked all the good ones out of Clone Wars, so the rest of them are all going to be higher. Next one is Kit Fisto, and we could also include Kit Fisto and Nadar Veb versus Grievous, although Nadar Veb doesn't put up much of a fight. But I really like this end fight where Kit Fisto goes up against Grievous in Grievous's lair when he has Nadar's lightsaber and his own lightsaber. It is pretty short though, so when it's compared to the rest of these Clone Wars fights, it's not as much of a standout. But I've always loved just the whole visual of Lair of Grievous, as well as the way that's shot on the landing platform. Probably C.
Yeah, I think C as well. I think Kit Fisto is probably even now one of the most least explored Jedi. Even if it's not like a technically sound or crazy fight, it's nice that he beat Grievous, got the upper hand, and escaped on his own terms. So pretty pleased with it. I'll give it a C.
Sounds good. Let's move on to the next one, which is also from season 1. This is Luminara and Ahsoka versus Ventress. This is another one that visually has always stood out to me when they're fighting and everything's exploding. And there's all the fire. I've always liked the way it looks. It also has that really good close up of Ventress. It's not doesn't have like a particular sequence that I think truly stands out. So it also is one of the lesser ones from the Clone Wars that I included on here. But I do remember this fight quite well, so that's why I threw it up. I'm fine with C or bottom of B.
I'll give it a C. There's some pretty interesting things. Ventress does some pretty cool things. Like she cuts up all those huge pipes, dude, and tries to drop them on Unduli and gets her trapped. So it's pretty good, honestly, especially for where season. I want to. It was season 2, I think. Or was it season 1? Yeah, I mean, then that's a pretty good fight for season 1, honestly. Yeah, that's definitely a C then.
The next one is Obi-Wan versus Pre Vizsla. This is from season 2. This is the first time we get to see the dark saber, so that's one of the reasons I included it. Now, it's not even close to as good as Pre Vizsla versus Darth Maul. It was cool to see not only the dark saber, but how a Mandalorian would fight a Jedi with all the Mandalorian different tricks and gadgets that he can use versus somebody like Obi-Wan, who's very well experienced. We also get to see Obi-Wan fight Jango Fett, so it's kind of an evolution of that into somebody with an actual lightsaber fighting Obi-Wan who has all those same gimmicks. So I could see B as for me right now. I think that's where I'm leaning, but I'm also fine with C.
I have to give it a C. It's more talking and less fighting. Like I think I remember when I watched it the first time, like he gets pushed back by the force, right? And his 3 death commandos are behind him. They're like, oh yeah, they try to push their boss back in the fight. He's just like, get off. He tries to use the height advantage against Obi-Wan, and like you said, it's an evolution from the Jango fight where Obi-Wan has learned and he doesn't have like the whole hook around him, so that's not even like an issue for him this time around.
Starting with this next fight, which is from season 3. This is from the ARC Trooper episodes on Kamino. Anakin versus Ventress. When you get to season 3 and beyond, when the animation style changes and they got a little bit more money to create more fluid animation, the lightsaber duels in general get significantly better. And this is one of the first memorable ones from that season and from that animation style. This one, again, is not my favorite of the Clone Wars, but it is more of a hardcore, more brutal fight than pretty much anything we had seen in the Clone Wars at that point. And also Kamino as a backdrop, all the different levels of Kamino, inside, outside. I do enjoy this one quite a bit. I would say B for me.
Yeah, I'll put it in the same place. Yeah, I mean, it is really the fluidity that adds to this fight. I wouldn't say it's a great fight until they get to that open platform where Anakin really gets to do like a lot of the similar things he does in the Yavin 4 fight.
Moving on to this next one, which is definitely the hardest little icon here to see. This is Anakin versus Dooku on Naboo. And this is one of my favorite, most like underrated duels because this is the one where Dooku's just throwing chairs at him and he's like being really blustery because Palpatine's there. He's showing off. And there's like a lot of both Anakin using his anger and really like getting into the fight because he wants to save Palpatine, also wants to show off in front of Palpatine, but Dooku's also kind of messing with him because he wants to show off in front of Palpatine. That being said, I would still probably put it towards the top of B and not necessarily an A yet.
Yeah, I will give it a top of B. I almost want to give it an A, but yeah, like you said, it's like the chair stuff that really gets me because it's like, yeah, Dooku is for the most part, he's like, yeah, this is my fight. Like, okay, like you got past the droids, I'll like engage with you a little bit. But it's when the chairs come out and he's just driving forward, Anakin's driving forward and just stabbing the chairs is like the odds, like it's finally like turning over to Anakin's favor.
So the next one, next couple are Dooku related as well. This one I think is also underrated because it's overshadowed by the one after this. But this is when Dooku is blinded. I think this one is really cool, mainly just because it enhances the character of Dooku. We see so many great Dooku fights in the Clone Wars that we weren't really able to get in the films because of Christopher Lee's age. But this one in particular really elevates Dooku's just badass status as a duelist. This one's right on the border of B and A for me as well.
I'll give it a B. It's really nice to see like how like the Night Sister magic is used in this fight. It's always nice to see a different sort of fight too. Plus points for having Pajama Dooku as well. I love that.
And the next one is then Ventress and Savage versus Dooku, which is definitely a more elevated fight. Everybody's on more of an equal playing field. I'd say this one is probably also B for.
Wow, I'm tempted to give it an A. That's because I loved a lot of the. It's pretty interesting how Ventress has developed, has changed into this fighter at this point in time. It's also early Savage where he's more of like just a lumbering, lunky beast.
I'd
Let's
say
get
let's put
B. Yeah,
top of B. Top of
yeah.
B. Because the next one I think is an A fight, and that's Maul and Savage versus Ventress and Obi-Wan. And this is when we really get going in the Clone Wars and start ramping up with some incredible fights here into season 4, beginning of season 5. I put this one in A, probably towards the bottom of A though.
A for sure. I love the flirtatious stuff between Obi-Wan and Ventress. Like just the way she says funny, like to something that Obi-Wan says. I don't know. It's like a core memory for me. It's like stuck in. Reminds me of like 2011 all over again or something. Anytime you see Obi-Wan with his hair kind of dangling, he's like off balance too. It's just a really well done fight on every level.
I think that's one of the standouts of really this whole era of Maul in Star Wars, Clone Wars. But next is one of my favorites, just because, like you said, for that last fight as a core memory for you, this is a core memory for me because I remember watching this, and it's pre Vizsla versus Darth Maul. But I remember watching this, and I think season 5, these episodes were probably coming out in about early 2012. So I was a little bit older now for the Clone Wars. I was in my teens and watching this. I remember seeing it, and when Maul beheads Pre Vizsla, I was like, "Oh my gosh!" Like I didn't realize how dark this show gets. Like it's just such a strong memory, and everything that has to do with the fight itself, I think, is really strong, as well as the banter between the two of them, what it means and what the stakes are. I really love this fight. For me, this is an A as well.
Yeah, it's the challenge that, Maul throws out. He's like, beats his chest, you and me, one on one. And he does everything right, honestly. Like, this is a fight that I think Pre could have won. Like, his missiles hit Maul, like, everything goes right for him till the point, till, Maul jumps up in the air, knocks him down, damages jetpack. The shield's always gonna hold up so much, and then once they fight, and he just Maul just like wallops him and like gets into the ground. Like this man's ribs are not just broken, like he's like got internal bleeding for sure. Like everything is going wrong for him. Pre-Vizsla is an honorable fighter in this, even if Maul is like vicious and monstrous, he does win by every fair mean. So it's a great fight for me. Top of A for sure. Top of A for sure.
Awesome. Yeah, this is one of my favorites. Okay, so next is also one of my favorites, and I know in our top 5 lightsaber duels, which we did like way over a year ago, so opinions not necessarily have changed, but they could change. This is in my top 5, and this is one of my favorite lightsaber duels: Sidious versus Maul and Savage. Not only because it is the most like prequely fight in the Clone Wars, like it is all spectacle. And this I love the spectacle. I also love Palpatine's cackling, his taunting. You have become a rival. Like, oh, I love that. Oh, it's so good. And killing Savage in this, seeing Maul at his weakest, have mercy. There is no mercy. Like I love all of that. I love the way it's juxtaposed with Palpatine in Revenge of the Sith when he's doing the exact same thing. For me, it's at least top of A, but I could put it S.
I'll give it an S. It might drop, but I'll give it an S for sure. It's like those fine details where like he chokes uh the Maul DeLoreans outside, and like they're like, oh, and you're like, oh man, it's like Sidious is gonna, he's not messing around now. And the fact that he uses two instead of one, like in Revenge of the Sith, that adds to it. When he spins around with his both lightsabers, he like cuts the ground, and like he's a guy who's just like he's such a wild card, even in like the most minute ways that throw you off. And in live action, it looked cheesy, but here I can like, yeah, like I can see why you're off balance because he's like revealing in like just the extension of like his chaos. Like these lightsabers are like loose and flowing in so many ways. I do like how Maul does fight back once Savage dies to a degree, and Savage's end is really touching, honestly.
Okay, so this is Anakin versus Barriss right at the end of season 5. Another good fight. Also, I love the setting of this one, going through the Jedi Temple, all the different layers to it, the courtyard, in the main hallways, in Barriss's room. All of it works really, really well. It's an aggressive fight. It's an angry fight. And it's a fight that has a lot of emotion and a lot of meaning to the path of Anakin Skywalker. I think I would throw this one an A as well.
Yeah, I'll give it an A. Like, it's more of a bottom A for me though, because it's more like thematically and build up that's great for me. It's once we get to the fight. Yeah, the jumping, like you said, through there. We even see like the Padawan group um to like idolize Anakin while they're doing forms, and then bam, Master Skywalker's there just like wailing on Varys off, and you're like, what's going on? Like that's crazy. Um and it's more, yeah, it does do a lot of the same things as like the Yavin fight for me. At the very end, you see like Barris, like she like turns up a knob on him. This guy's already on edge because everything going on to Ahsoka. Finding out it's her only adds more to it. Chokes her in the air, like pushes her against the tree.
From season 6, this is Yoda and Anakin versus Sidious and Dooku. And it's a really good fight. I think the only thing that brings it down for me is the fact that it's not real. It's like all a vision or a dream. But I think it does work really well. It is a nice prelude to Revenge of the Sith. I think just because it's not real, though, I'd probably put it in B.
Yeah, it's a B for me. I enjoy like tumbling through the levels that uh, Yoda and Palpatine go through, and their fight is pretty interesting. It's just the fact that like while Yoda's scampering, he's like, Anakin, no, and like Dooku's already on the ground, like ready to get his head chopped off. I'm like, this is way too fast for Dooku.
So next is the last Clone Wars battle we have in this video, and it is Ahsoka versus Maul, Siege of Mandalore. Definitely the most fluid fight we've seen, motion capture. I like this battle a lot. I think for me, it's definitely A, but I have a hard time putting it in up in S. I don't know what your thoughts are, but for me, it's definitely towards the top of A and probably my top 7 or 8.
It's just like a tick above the pre-Vizsla Maul fight for me, so it's an A as well. Mainly because the motion cap stuff was great, but it ends up being a little bit of a gimmick because they don't really make it for that whole fight. I just don't think there's enough to be an S tier. Like it's really close. Like Maul screaming at the end, like "Let me die!" Like all these things. Like it's great. I love all this stuff.
Next is Obi-Wan and Anakin versus Count Dooku at the beginning of Revenge of the Sith. This one is significantly better than their last meeting with Count Dooku. Obi-Wan, and again, kind of disappointing in this, and that's what I think brings down the fight a little bit. But Anakin versus Dooku is really strong. It's a lot faster. It's a lot more like the Clone Wars in terms of how quick Dooku moves as well. And obviously, it's a very important fight for the journey of Anakin Skywalker. Still, though, I would probably, compared to the rest of this, I would probably put it either mid to bottom of B or top of C.
I agree. I think just when it's solely Anakin and Dooku, it's really fun. It's really quick. Maybe a little less acrobatic because it's a lot more steps back and forth, and then Anakin finally takes the lead there. I'll say mid B.
Yeah, I think maybe right behind Yoda, Dooku. That's
Yeah,
probably a good spot. We're gonna have a lot of Bs. I feel like Grievous, Obi-Wan. So this one, I guess the fight is not as good, but this one is to me one of my favorites from as a kid, mainly because Grievous was so cool with the 4 lightsabers. Obi-Wan beats him pretty easily. Obviously, hello there raises it at least 1 letter grade. Other than that, it is still probably a C.
Yeah, I think it's a fight that a lot of people, because they think of Hello There, you're like, "Oh, man, it must have been such a great fight." But there's things that do bother me about it, like, the actual fight is pretty pathetic because the gimmick of the spinning arms is done. Like, you're like, "Oh, shit, what's he gonna do?" Waves around, bop. It's like, "Wait, what?" Like, that's it? And then, that's and, like, yeah, like, he does have some interesting combos at the start, but they're easily deflected by Obi-Wan. And then it's not really a fight by the end because then it's just a chase. So I think C is pretty good.
Yeah, I think so too. Maybe right in front of Qui-Gon and Maul. Next is one of my favorite scenes in Star Wars, probably for the wrong reasons. I think it's so funny. I love the corkscrew. There's so many things I love about Palpatine here. Like this just defines the cheesy, goofy villain aspect of Palpatine that I love so much. But yeah, it's not a great fight, especially if you're including the beginning with the Jedi Masters who go down really quickly and easily, for Scream or not. Yeah, I have a hard time not putting it in D or F, but I love this scene nonetheless.
As much as people want to complain about Ian and whatever it is, I don't think Samuel L. Jackson does great here either, honestly. He does some very basic striking and all that. Nothing like moving. Like, this is a guy that if you told me he wasn't in the war, he was just an advisor, and this is like it's one time picking up the lightsaber, I've been like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, it's a little rusty. Um, It's more like the big swings at the end when they crash open the window that you're like, "Wow, that looks so cool." Honestly, it's a bottom of D for me. I like Anakin's fight more than, this corkscrew or not, like, it's very narrow of a fight too.
Okay, the Battle of Heroes. This is my favorite lightsaber duel of all time. Come out and say it. I don't know if it'll be at the top of our S by the end, but for me, it's definitely top of S right now.
I agree for right now. It's not my favorite. It's definitely my favorite of the prequels. Um, an excellent fight. It might be a little overly long at times. Like even the swinging and fighting, it's just like, why are you guys trying to fight right now? Like it's collapsing on you. Like what are you doing as they're on that bridge spire? Like some of those things that I'm just like, it's a little hilarious at the times. Um, but it's so thematically good. It's so fun. The punches, the kicks, the chokes, even the spinning lightsaber. I saw an explanation on like TikTok where like fencers, like they are like swiveling around their swords, or like some sort of like rapier fighters, where if you know someone so well, like it happened.
And it is just heightened by the end of the fight with Anakin's burning and you were my brother, Anakin. I love you. You were the chosen one. All that's so good. Yoda versus Darth Sidious. This is another one. I feel like people go back and forth on this one, but I've never really understood it because I think it gives us a really interesting side of Star Wars that we don't get very often. It's the two masters of the Force, especially one that's just like cackling and screaming, and then the other one, Yoda, who's just trying to like jump around on the different Senate pods. I love this one. I'm gonna put this in A.
I want to give it a bottom of A because if this list is really about lightsaber dueling, they don't really do too much. Once they kind of like launch up the Senate pod, they're still fighting on that, and then you know he's loses his lightsaber from, and he's forced to kind of like deflect it. It's more when it becomes a battle of the Force that it's a great duel. When it's a lightsaber fight, it has its moments.
So this next one is the first fight between Obi-Wan and Vader. Now, very thematically important, but obviously doesn't last very long, and it's very one-sided. It's still a well-shot scene, a pretty solid scene, but I guess in the context of good duels, it's probably at least a C tier, maybe a D tier.
Yeah, I give it somewhere like top of C, maybe behind, or maybe I honestly like mid behind Kit Fisto or something. I mean, it's not really a fight. Like when when you see Vader just going, damn, like look at what you become. I am what you made me, right? And then he just like scampers away.
The next one is, and you can't see this one really at all either. This is Reva versus Vader. It's also a very one-sided fight. I think this one is a well choreographed and very, very cool though. I'm struggling where to put it. I would say probably B for me, but that's mainly because it is so one-sided. I love seeing what Vader can do here though.
Yeah, I'd say it's top of B for me. Honestly, it's Reva doesn't do anything horribly wrong. Like, yeah, she's trying to like straddle the ground. go for his legs, which I think is a smart move. A lot of people kind of go for Vader's upper body, which is a mistake in my mind. It's like go for the legs. I don't know how flexible Vader is to like bend down and touch his toes. Like
Next is the last duel between Obi-Wan and Vader in episode 6 of Obi-Wan Kenobi. This one is pretty awesome. I love this scene. It is the best lightsaber duel in the Disney era of Star Wars that's not animated. I want to put it in A, and right now I'd say maybe the top of A.
I'm gonna say S. I think he can drop down. I'm gonna say S because every time I see this fight, it just makes me happy. It's so good. A lot of it is reliant on the Force, especially once they both kind of become Force gods in this fight. But there's like these things about Vader and Obi-Wan that I don't think they ever have really shown that they should have. Like Vader uses his physicality, like, but I just loved it. Even if you described everything with the Force, just the fighting alone was just tremendous. We saw fully fledged Vader in live action and an older Obi-Wan that returned to like great form. So that alone made it really worthwhile for me.
All right, I'm fine with it. S now. I know I have at least one other one that goes in there. I think we both do, but we'll see where it ends up. Next is Kanan versus the Grand Inquisitor. This is the last fight they have when the Grand Inquisitor dies. There are a couple good fights between the Grand Inquisitor and Kanan and Ezra, but this is the most that's not one-sided. I would say Grand Inquisitor is usually in pursuit in the rest, so this is why I put this one on the list, and I think this is a good one. Now, in the realm of animated lightsaber duels, this is not one of my top favorites. I don't think it's better than a lot of Clone Wars, but I would say it's still probably solidly a B for me.
I'm gonna argue for an A. I think the choreography of this fight is great because there's also the uniqueness of like how he uses Ezra's stun lightsaber combo, which I think is pretty cool. Kind of keeping Grand Inquisitor off guard. Um, there's like interesting like splice that he does to cut up like the command center to get to Grand Inquisitor, putting his lightsabers in between the blades and then cutting them open. Um, just like the fast paced rushing back and forth of it.
Let's go to next one, and for me, this would be the one that I think as of now I would bump Obi-Wan Vader or Maul Sidious out for, and this is Ahsoka Vader on Malachor. There's nothing, I guess, super fancy about the fighting, but when we're talking about thematic lightsaber duels, really this one in Return of the Jedi's and maybe Battle of Heroes are the most thematically rich, character rich lightsaber duels that we have. Yes, Obi-Wan and Vader is also very similar, and it takes a lot of cues from this duel. I think mainly because this one did it first is the reason why it struck a chord with me with the Vader mask coming off. But also just that being really an iconic moment for Vader's full transition. It was the first time we got to hear the Anakin voice coming out of the Vader suit, and the way Ahsoka reacts to, like, there's something about her reaction, no suspecting that's Vader, pretty much knowing that it's Vader, but she doesn't want to believe it's Vader or the Anakin's Vader, and then when she hears the voice, seeing her reaction, I think is what puts it over the edge for me.
I'm fine with knocking it out for the time being. Like if we have to move it down, like put it ahead of that fight, for sure. I think it's nice because the comparison of like the Vaders when each side is removed. Um, the Rebels one is a little bit more mournful, right? Versus where the, the Obi-Wan one is psychotic. It's like I'm here to kill. It's like it's crazy. I think it's nice to see that change and that relationship is also very different. Like Ahsoka did not do anything wrong to Anakin. It was never her fault. So yeah, I'll say it's up there. Yeah,
We could just make it a top six. We'll break the rule once.
yeah, we
Let's
could,
make it a
we
top
could.
six. The next is Maul versus Obi-Wan on Tatooine. Obviously, this duel has been debated by many people. I think right now, it seems like everybody really loves this now. When it came out, everybody's like, wait, that's it. Uh, what a great homage to samurai films. It is a wonderful little character moment. Obviously, the duel itself is not particularly anything special, but it is showing Obi-Wan's at least mental mastery over Maul, and Maul's, you know, mind being so stuck in the past. There's a lot of great stuff pre-fight. I like this one a lot. I'm putting it in A.
It's an A for me as well. It's like you said, it's pre-fight. It's how like the duel has been fought hundreds of times over before the first move has actually been made, right? And once that first move happens, it's already the fight is already done, right? Like Maul comes in with the butt up, right? That he thinks that yeah, Obi-Wan's gonna fall for that. Obi-Wan's seen that move in his mind. I love like what he gives at the very end to Maul, like when the horror is leaving his body. At the same time, he's at least being imbued with like the peace of like finally being freed from this like Sisyphus like role in his life.
Next is, I feel like this is the toughest one to rank out of like every duel on the list because it's Obi-Wan versus Vader, but this was the original lightsaber duel. This is the first one we ever got to see. And because of that, the choreography is not very good. It's very slow. It has two really old people dueling, but there's something about it that just is timeless. I think the way it's staged also looks pretty nice. There's so many iconic shots. I think the way they use a lot more like medium shots than medium close-ups for the two characters, as well as a lot of wides that really like make iconic images. But yes, the duel is not necessarily great, but I would still say I'd put it in A, at least at the bottom of A.
I guess I'm gonna be a bit scandalous. I think it's a bottom B at best. I was almost gonna say C. Um, it's not bad. It really isn't. It's like you said, I agree with every point you said. It's shot in a different way. It's the first. It has some really fun things that I love, like Obi-Wan's spin, like the way he like waves around his lightsabers. I'll give you I'll give you top of B, especially in thematic importance, especially after the Kenobi fight of Obi-Wan and how it's like the finale, the final conclusion.
I'll take top of B. I think that's fair. I'm really into the history of like what it does, is especially like kind of like our score list where I was like, I need episode 4 up there in the top. Like for me, I love the history of it, but yes, it's not even close to like any of these other fights in terms of choreography. So the next one, obvious S tier. This is Vader Luke, and I think this is your number one. Right, this is Empire Strikes
Yeah.
Back fight. Uh, I don't have a problem putting it at the top of S. I think it's easy. It's easily my number two, like by far to me. Battle of Heroes and Empire Strikes Back, Luke Vader are the top two. This is a multi-layered fight. It's kind of where all the prequel fights take their at least design and their choreography in terms of the fight layout. I love the three different settings. I think all of it looks great, and it is probably maybe not the best shot fight in terms of its ability to capture the choreography itself. I think that easily goes to Battle of Heroes, but it's the most beautiful looking fight. The way it's staged, all the different iconic scenes, all the different iconic locations. It's hard not to at least put it top two, but I'm fine putting it one.
It is still my favorite duel of all time because compared to Battle of the Heroes, nothing is wasted in there. I think there's moments of Battle of the Heroes that feel a little bloated, a little like, okay, like did we need that moment there? Like when I see something like when Anakin jumps onto that little mini pod and then he fights on that mini pod and then finally makes that leap and like leans back. Like, yeah, I love all those things, but it's the one where it's like, yeah, this is a Vader he's plotted out this fight. Like Luke can nudge him in a different direction that he doesn't love, but he's like, all right, I have a plan for this. Like he's here to test him out. He's here to like play with his food. And when he's finally had enough, it's like, yeah, he is the boogeyman. And I think if there's ever been a moment that he's been the boogeyman, it will be the moment that he holds his breath, comes out, and then everything from that moment on, like Luke just doesn't know what to do. Yeah.
Yeah, all of those are fair points. I completely agree with all of them. Purely for Battle of Heroes, it's absolutely 100% nostalgia. I just watch it all the time. It's like Obi-Wan's my favorite character as well, so having him a part of it. But I I'm completely happy putting Luke versus Vader as number one, especially because I think this shot in this thumbnail might be my favorite shot in all of Star Wars. I think it's absolutely stunning, and I have multiple posters of it on my wall. So next is Vader Luke in Return of the Jedi, which is a fight that's grown on me more and more over the years as I've gotten more and more attached to the Luke character. Whether it's exploration of him and the new canon post Return of the Jedi, but also, just as I get older and as I read more and more Legends stuff that take place post Return of the Jedi, how much I love Jedi Luke. I think seeing it all come out here and then his ability to stand against the Emperor after. I love everything about this fight. I would love to put it in S if we didn't just do a top five or now a top six. I don't think choreography wise it's better than any of those in the S tier, but I would say it's easily top of A for me.
I don't think it's top of A for me. I think it's like the second or third for me. Because I think when we see the fight happen and we cut back to it after they hold their lightsabers, it's a very fast physical fight. Like there's serious weight behind those blades. Um, there's some cool things of like lower your defenses and like there's really cool moments, but then the fight kind of devolves into more of like a mental warfare, and it's like when the whole sister thing comes out, it's like then it's just like like a rage filled Luke just like unleashing, but it's a little messy for me at that point when he kind of comes and like pushes like like Vader in there. Like, yeah, I know this is a man who loves his son and he's like struggling with everything going on. And then he kind of like reverts his old ways to see if he can get the upper edge here. The fact that like once he like Luke is pushing him, the score is wonderful. But once he gets into the bridge, and then he just kind of like settles into position and collapses. That's like that one part of the choreography after that whole swinging messes. Like it's emotional, but it doesn't feel as good as how it was at the beginning with like the insane kicks and Vader flying, the weight of it. Like it starts off so well and it ends emotionally well. It just on a technical level, I don't think it's anywhere near as good as it could have been.
I guess that's fair, but I think the emotion definitely carries this fight like it carries some of these other ones that we have up here. I would still put it like right here, I think. So now we have the sequel fights, and I forgot if I said this at the beginning, but I meant to say it. Uh, the criteria for this list was lightsaber on lightsaber dueling, so there is no fight from the Praetorian Guards in The Last Jedi. There's also no Kylo Ren versus Luke because Luke's not actually there, so their lightsabers never really connect, and also Luke never hits Kylo Ren's lightsaber in general, so never mind. Now we get into Kylo versus Rey, and you can also lump in Kylo versus Finn here. I almost put that separately, but it's kind of all the evolution of the same thing. I enjoy this fight, particularly the setting. I know some people could find it bland because it is a forest, but I love the way the snow is falling. I like the way it reflects off the lightsaber. I really like the coloring in this. I think J.J. Abrams, one of the best things about him is his visuals, and especially with color grading. I enjoy a lot of his color grading, the way he pops with bright colors. I've always really enjoyed this fight. I know I'm higher on the Force Awakens than you. I don't think I would put it in A though. I would still put it in B, and I would probably put it in the top 3 or 4 of B.
I mean, you might be higher on Force Awakens as a whole, but I might be higher on this tool than you. I really do like it. I think the whole Finn stuff and everything, it's like a nice little setup. And then once the lights, like, as much as I don't like a lot of parts in the setup or lack of in The Force Awakens, there's something so emotionally like evocative of when Rey pulls the lightsaber and Kylo doesn't get it, but she grabs it and the music comes out and she like that's such a good scene. Like I was like cheering in the theaters when that happened. Yeah, there are some things like technically that like especially when she like connects with the force and like the swingings are kind of like looping instead of like slashes, right? That I could like put a fault on. But like if we are saying emotion is a point of this fight, I think it's just a way that she connects to the force to herself.
I'm fine with that. I'll put it let's put it right in front of Barris.
Yeah.
I think it's a good fight. I love this movie, so it is for me. It's always worked. This is one of the most interesting and unique fights. Now, the choreography is nothing special. It is very much so a war of words. So I think it probably would be the lowest of the three sequel trilogy fights I have in here on my list. But I think visually and the way it's spliced together with the Force Dyad stuff, I've always thought this was one of the standout scenes of The Rise of Skywalker for me. And I think the lightsabers duels aren't really the problem with The Rise of Skywalker. I'd probably throw this one in B.
I'd give it a B as well. Um, it's nice because like when we first were hearing about like these force fights where like they're gonna be flashing across planets, and it's just it's only between Kijimi and Star Destroyer room with the where Kylo has all his stuff. It's not a bad technical fight. Like it is a lot more of like pushing against each other.
All right. So the last duel we have is from The Rise of Skywalker. This is the one on the Death Star 2 wreckage from the middle of The Rise of Skywalker. I think this one, so I'm torn on this one because I think visually and the setting, we've talked a lot about setting for lightsaber duels in this video, and setting for this one, I think, is one of the more unique ones. It's one of the only things we've seen surrounded by water, or at least involving water, since the Ventress Anakin duel way back in the 2003 Clone Wars. I would have loved to see a bit more of like the sizzling off the blades and stuff. I would have liked to see a little bit more of the like water impact on the lightsaber dueling itself, but I do like the visuals of them all soaking wet and how messy this duel is as well. I like seeing the evolution of both characters in terms of both their technique, but also the fact that they both use the Force quite often in this, similar to how we've seen like Vader use the Force on Reva, where they use it to stop a blade or something. I find all that quite interesting. I think the dueling itself, though, isn't as memorable for me as the setting and some of the shots. Like this shot in particular is a fantastic shot. Like this is a great poster. But I don't know. I'm torn. I would put it higher than Kijimi for sure, but I'd probably put it in B still.
I want to fight for bottom of A. I think there's something to be said about them being like force monsters in this scene, where they're just jumping over waves, which is insane to me. When a lot of these shots, establishing shots, when we see them fighting, unfortunately, are the best the duel looks. It's when we get closer to them that it's much slower, and it's like every grip or whatever that Ray tries against Ben, there's nothing to it, right? Um, but there is an emotional weight to it where he like Leia reaches out and finally connects them at this one moment. I don't know. I would say this is a better fight than Force Awakens. I don't know. I could see a very low, like bottom of A. I could argue for that. I can see a top of B, but I'll argue for bottom of A.
Yeah, I'm not particularly sold on this either way. I think I prefer Force Awakens mainly because of the theater experience with that, and I like the darkness of it. I also really like the Finn part. I like how unhinged Kylo Ren is in that. I think this is more of a prequely fight. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Let us know what you think of our list down below, as well as what your favorite lightsaber duels are. Give us maybe your top 5, top 10, or your bottom 5, bottom 10. Let us know down below. If you haven't yet, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. If you haven't checked out the History of Star Wars Part 2 that went up the other day, check that out. It is about 1984 to 1998, basically when the EU was born in Star Wars with Heir to the Empire and all that. So check all those videos out. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.